Welcome to Pathways to Greatness, the show where faith meets focus and potential becomes purpose. I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, mental performance coach, speaker, and believer that greatness begins within. Each episode, we'll uncover the biblical principles, mindset strategies, and daily disciplines that help student athletes, parents, and leaders just like you walk boldly in their calling. Let's step onto the path that leads to true greatness, God's way. Hey, and welcome back to Pathways to Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, and what an episode. So I have a 3-time returning guest, Coach Jeff Huebner from Palm Beach Atlantic University, and the first 2 were fantastic. The third one, fantastic. And the conversations continue to build on themselves. So if this is the first time you're hearing me talk about Coach Jeff Huebner, if you scroll back through all the episodes, if you're a new listener or you just happen to miss one of those, there's 2 other ones. I highly encourage you to listen to all of those because the topics are different, but they're just building on one another. And I appreciate the wisdom that he has to share through personal experience. And this isn't just theory. And sometimes you have people who talk about leadership, who talk about success, that do a really good job communicating what it's like and haven't really done it. And when I talk to Coach Huebner, you can tell a lot of this stuff is real-time developments, and he uses real examples, and it's things that transfer it from him talking about things on the volleyball court into your life at home, into your professional life, whatever it may be. These are all transferable skills and challenges that you need to have. And in today's episode, we talk about the difference between his first season, which according to I would say society standards was not successful because of the win-loss record, compared to his second season, which was successful. They made the playoffs. They had a good run, and it was a great opportunity for growth that was completely opposite from the year before. And he talks about how he did that. And a lot of it I'm not going to tell you everything because I want you to listen to the episode because he does a better job than I do. It's around setting expectations. It's around having a process, a vision, and then having leadership that supports you, that you communicate up, and then there's things that are communicated down. Again, that can happen at home. It can happen everywhere because most times things are challenged when there's not expectations and there's poor communication. So one of the things he talks about that I'm going to challenge you to listen towards is the success that he had in the second season compared to the first season, what the big difference was. And that was around not looking around so much. So with all that being said, hang on, get your pen and pad ready. Be prepared to be able to rewind and fast forward and save things because it's a great episode filled with a lot of good things that you can use in your life today. So ladies and gentlemen, Coach Jeff Huebner. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the show. And we have now a 3rd-time guest, Coach Jeff Huebner from Palm Beach Atlantic. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think you're now the 3rd-time guest that I've had, and it's been fun because the conversations have been different. So the first one, so I'll tee this up to you, is the first one that I had is I just wanted to have a regular conversation and just wing it. Normally I ask the would you rathers and all that. And then since we've had these conversations and I hope people go back because I reference both of our conversations quite regularly because I get so much out of them. That go back, and if you want to hear his would you rathers, you can go back there. But Coach has had a very interesting last 2 seasons, and I reached out to him because I wanted to talk more about it. But before we go into that, congratulations on making the tournament this year. I know that that's a huge goal and accomplishment.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was like definitely on the list of things that we felt like was possible. The when was not something we had totally ironed out when we took the job, but it's pretty cool that we got the opportunity to realize that this year for sure.
And so that was the main thing that I wanted to touch base with Coach today, is that there was such a difference between the first season and the second season, and now he's going on to the third season. And what we just discussed before I hit record was how often in life that each of us individually, if you're not involved in sports, where you'll have one season, you have something tragedy, you have something that's not expected, or even if you do expect it, but it's not living up to the goals that you have. And then the
Mm.
next go around, then things start to go well. And then you want to continue to build on that. So if you can give the audience who aren't volleyball fanatics or fans or whatever, just involved in the sport, give everybody just a brief synopsis of your first season at PBA and what you encountered when you first got there.
Yeah, so the first year, we talked a lot about championship level behaviors, um, as really how are we going to create a championship level experience. And there's a lot of different things that we like to try to justify in our heads as coaches. We talk about student athlete experience, making sure that the kids are well taken care of, their mental health is good, um, and the academics are good. And we usually try to, if the winning and the losing aren't there, I think we do a good job as a group being like, so this is how we're going to make ourselves feel really good. And so we really did, I thought last year, approach every day that way as a staff. And then we definitely had some kids who approached it that way and saw the value in it. And then we had some kids who didn't understand that. And I think that was the hardest part of last year was the two groups juxtaposed with one another, and most of them, and most kids too, they say they want something. And then when they're confronted with the opportunity to do that, that's when you really find out what they actually want. But I do think that in sports, we're so well conditioned to know what the right thing to say is, that sometimes we don't understand the implications of what those words mean. And so that was really what we spent all of 24, 25 doing. It's just like, hey, I know you're telling me that you want to be all conference. This is what it takes to be all conference. I know you're telling me that you want to be a spiritual leader. This is what it takes to be a spiritual leader. I know you're telling me you want to be a nurse or a doctor. Well, this is what it takes to be a nurse or a doctor. And so that was like not mitigating expectations, but making sure that we understood the reality of the actions that had to come with those expectations. That was what we did all of 24, 25. And then this year, we spent so much time in the spring of 25 setting our vision for the team. And the way that we did that was we walked in to every spring, every Friday, and we would practice for an hour. And then at the end of the hour practice, we would walk out, the coaching staff would walk out and leave a question with the team of like, how many games do you want to win? What do you think is important to winning? What do you think is important for the academic side? Community service? What do we want to do? These kinds of things. And then we would show up about 45 minutes later and let them tell us the good ideas they had. And then we would tell them what would need to happen in order to make that goal a reality. So this year was really just like very well organized because of the work that our players in the spring did. And it was very easy for me to be like, this is what we're doing, because I wasn't the one who was setting any of that. I just was responding to what they wanted. And so, so that was kind of, the biggest, it was like an atlas almost. It just like told us where to go and what to do. And we just kept checking things off the list as we moved on,
Well, it sounds like you were able to get buy-in because it wasn't necessarily your idea. It was a vision of how to create the path that they need to structure to go.
Yeah. And athletes, and especially young people, they all want big things, and so sometimes it's just easier to ask them, what do you want? And then just be like, okay, that's great. Now you just do it this way. And then if they see what they need to do, then they usually buy in or buy out. Like it's not, once they understand the reality of the to-do list to become those things, then I think that they usually have very good clarity on what it means for them. And then they're able to make a real choice. And that was something that, this year we had, 19 kids on the team, and, for the most part, everybody made the same choice to buy in, which was super cool.
Well, like you said, then it's pointed in the right direction. And when you think about what Coach just shared, and this is a challenge to the audience, how many times have you said you wanted something, and then when you found out the to-do list, you started to create excuses and negotiate? Well, I want that, but I think I can get that without doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even maybe it's like, it should be part of the decision-making process. You shouldn't decide to do something before you know the to-do list. And like, it allows us to let our yeses be our yeses and our nos be our nos. Because sometimes, like, especially as a dad, I might want something, and then I find out all the things it's going to take to do that, and I have to make the hard choice to not do it. Um, and we do this in everything that we have kind of coming up. And sometimes the right choice is to find out the list and bail. And sometimes the right choice is to find out the list and double down, and knowing how it affects all the other things that you have going and what God's called you into in his life. Like those are the important ways to make those choices. And so I think that like finding out the to-do list is really important, but sometimes we try to like promise things before we know the work. And I think that's that's where we over promise and under deliver.
Right. Which is difficult. So when you took the job at PBA, and you had the conversation with your boss about what your vision is, I'm sure that was all part of the interview process.
Right.
I think you also have to set the expectations up as well as you do down about, you've got to help me see this through and allow me to put this together. Talk to people about how you're able to set a vision, because I know that that's important in life. And like you talked about as a dad, is that if you're working with your kids, you've got to make sure that your wife is on the same page and understands the process of where you're going. Because I think far too often we push things down and never, and I say up, I mean, if we have a wife, it's even, but at the same time, many times it's above. Yeah. But walk through that part, because I think that that's important, because what the audience needs to understand is, from a wins and loss perspective, last season wasn't successful. Would you agree?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, but we had to reframe before the season started what the goal of the year was going to be. So to me, like, I talked to my boss and I said, okay, at the end of this year, we're going to walk out of here knowing what it takes. We might not be able to do that because we're maybe not physical enough, or not tall enough, or don't jump high enough, or not strong enough, or not experienced enough, or maybe we're not good enough at volleyball, or whatever it is. Like, but we need to understand what it takes to be successful in this conference more than anything else that we get out of fall of 24. And so we kind of walked, I tried to walk my AD through that, and I mean, to her credit, she knew that was the job that we hired, we were hired into. And so she told us, like, and I asked her on the interview, I said, I need a pretty simple answer to this, but what's your expectation from a when can we return to being a really good volleyball program? Because that'll give me a good understanding of how much she understands about what it takes to win. And she said, she wants it to be done right, and she wants it to be sustainable, and she wants it to be something that we can, year in and year out, have good programs and good teams. And so, that really helped me. And then she even kind of went on to like talk about, this is like a 3 to 5 year in her brain job to get it to where we want it to be. And I still agree with her, even though we were really successful this year. There were some things that we, missed out on, some opportunities that we maybe could have grabbed if we were maybe a little bit older, a little bit more mature. Maybe we'd been there before, little things that, I think that it's important to realize, like, now we have all the gear related to climbing the mountain. I think that was like, we know what the mountain looks like, and that was last year. And now we're like, oh, these are all the things that we're going to need. So these are the recruiting things that we need. This is the stuff I need to do better prepare my freshmen. These are the things that we need to see improvements in order for my team to be better, even though we're returning most of our most of our starting lineup. And, we can't just run it back. That's not going to be the way that we're going to continue to steward the gifts that we were given well.
Well, and what's great, and again, this is the bright spot of having a great conversation with you, is that this is all about expectations to me. It's like setting proper expectations for everything. And I know I don't do a well enough job consistently in my life of setting expectations, even for myself when I'm approaching something. And you probably had to look in the mirror and go, okay,
Yeah.
Jeff, here's the deal. Here's what I need to expect out of myself as a head coach. And then you have to hold yourself to the standard. And what one of the two words that you said was right and sustainable. And in this world of this microwave world of instant gratification, right and sustainable usually is not said in the same sentence. It's, I need you to win today. And then, if you didn't win last year, you would have felt pressure and saying, well, what's going on, coach? Why aren't we having the success that we brought you in for? But you set the right expectation, and then you understood her expectation as well. And that's important for us in life to be able to do that. So that way it takes the emotion out of it, and you're just looking at data at that point.
Right. No, that's all. That's all right. And her leadership in that, I think, is really important. And sometimes as people who work for other people, we're always looking for them to do a better job or a good job or that job. But I think if we really listen to what our supervisors want, then we'll learn all we need to know about how we want this to be done. And so I got great confidence in that from her, because she is very transparent and very direct and very straightforward. And sometimes that's hard. And sometimes there's things that we don't agree with, but like, as long as I know what the job is, then I can do the best version of this job with the expectations that I have. And so I think that she's really talented at that. And I think it's probably there, I think just as leaders in general, when you're an honest human, there's going to be people who appreciate that and people who find that to be abrasive. And as people, we should be so focused on welcoming accurate information all the time. We should just love that. And so that's something that I appreciate from her, even if it's hard to hear, or even if it's not what I believe myself. If I don't agree with it, I know what she's thinking, which is helpful.
And that's an interesting point, because I know for me, I've always been challenged with, I always accepted feedback as being a personal attack versus just feedback. And so how have you always been openly receptive to, positive, potentially frictional feedback?
I don't know. I think my last job is the place where I learned a lot about how important getting everybody on the same page was, because we had a lot of like growing positions. We had, a lot of, first time ever having a full-time strength and conditioning coach, and then first time having two athletic trainers instead of one. And like a lot of people who were, this is their first job. And I felt a lot of frustration when excellence wasn't the priority, because I think that my job as the coach of the student athlete is to advocate for my student athletes to be challenged and motivated and driven and taken care of in a way that's elite. And I don't care if it's Division I, Division II, 3, junior college, club. My little, 9-year-old volunteer team is going to get a great experience, because I think that that's the job of the coach, right? And so I think that at a certain point when I was there, I realized that the most important thing that I can do is just like be more interested in getting it right than being right. And Coach Lou is really good at this as well, and she's probably more talented at a younger age. But I believe that if you can't change your mind when you hear a better idea, then you are your own greatest limiter. Right away, as soon as you hear a better idea, you should be like, oh, that's a better idea, let's do that. And if you can't do that, then you're restricting your own growth, and you have to make your peace with it. You can tell people that it's fine if that's who you are, but you better wear that and just be like, look, my ideas are the right ideas. So if you work with or for me, then we're doing my ideas. And I think that then if you're a head coach or an assistant coach or a colleague of mine, then I can understand you. It's not a big deal. But if you're interested in being right, then you also have to admit that you're not that interested in getting it right. And so at some point in my last job, I know the first person I heard say that phrase was Colin Cowherd. I don't listen to a lot of Colin Cowherd, but I know that he was the one who said it. But it was something that I think hit me in just the way that it was phrased, and then I sort of have taken it. And you could check that. I think that we do a really good job of like, are we holding on to this idea because it was our first idea, it was our favorite idea, it was our favorite person, or because it's the right answer? And if it's the right answer, then defend it and fight it to the death, and don't accept anything less. But if there's any chance that somebody else has a different idea that's better, then you're hurting your own student athletes by not considering it at minimum. And there's sometimes ideas that are better but not applicable. There are things that Nebraska is doing that we can't do. And whether that's like from a training perspective or a gear perspective or whatever it is, but some of the ideas that they have are better than our ideas, but they don't function at our school for this reason or for that reason, and vice versa. There are some ideas that we have that would be better ideas for them, but that would not function for Cornhusker volleyball. And so understanding who you are, I think, is just as important as making sure that you just play copycat.
Yeah, and that's such great advice, because people will they'll see social influencers, they'll hear a Nick Saban, a Coach Huebner, or somebody, and say, well, this is the way they do it, so I'm going to do it. And I'm going to just, and that doesn't work. And I heard it from a strength and conditioning guys. Like, you guys come on here and you see these guys post their workout program on Instagram and you want to do it. Well, you may not be as advanced as them. You may have weaknesses in other areas that you could actually cause physical damage to your body if you try to do what they do.
Right.
The other thing that I really liked about what you were saying is that you just have to put your ego aside. When you talked about getting it right versus being right, you have to be so open-minded of, and this is where your vision comes into play, is I want to be successful as a program, so much so it doesn't have to be my idea. Yeah. In life, are we willing to say that? Are we willing to look in the mirror and say that to ourselves?
Yeah. And what do our kids learn about us when we parent them and we don't ever change our mind? And not that you should be fickle-minded or that you should be a pushover, but when you're wrong, are you teaching your kids how to respond to being wrong? And as coaches, it's really important. Like, there are times where I think this happened or that happened and I'm upset with the official, and then they explain it to me. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. And like, what do my players learn from me being allowed to be wrong? It's probably that I care about growing, and then they're going to care about growing. But if I'm not allowed to be wrong, then I probably teach them that being wrong is bad. And it's not. It's just a pathway to getting it right. Like, and I think that if you can view it that way, then, you actually give yourself a shot. But that's that old, like, Edison, didn't figure out electricity by figuring out the one right way. He figured out a lot of wrong ways, right? So I'm sure that's the butchering of the quote, but
yeah, it works.
Thousands of ways to not, that it doesn't work, right? So I think that's kind of the way that you can expect your people to respond the way you respond when things go wrong. And if you make a hitting error, that's probably wrong. I mean, that is wrong, but how do you respond to hitting errors? That's how your team's going to respond to it. And if you're just like, keep it moving, learn from it, move forward, then they've got a shot,
It's the old mental performance math equation of E plus R equals O. I don't know if you've heard that, but event plus response equals outcome. It's the same thing. Something happens and how you respond is the outcome. And if you look at it the way Coach Huebner talked about, is the event happens, the response happens, the outcome, it's really two answers to that. The outcome that you have within that event, but then also the outcome that happens from the way you responded that other people see and observe. And you've seen it. Coaches that blow their stack and whine and complain. What do the players do on the sideline? The exact same thing. They're stomping their feet. They're questioning every call that the official makes. But if you have a calm, cool, collected coach, usually you see the team do the same way. Just like if you're a parent, if you're a boss, you emulate the response that you want to have and expect to have. But if not, again, more things are caught than taught. The other thing I want to go back to that you had talked about is around watching and observing how other people do things. And I remember in my corporate job, we had that situation where we wanted to be a think tank and think of all the different opportunities that were in front of us. And the one rule we had is we couldn't say we can't do that.
Okay.
And really where it came about is let's say, again, if you compare a Nebraska program to a PBA, where, like you said, is some things just won't work financially, logistically won't work. But the concept of, we can't do it the way they do it, but we can do things differently, maybe in the same vein that they're looking at, but how does it work for us? And I feel as if in my life and in other people's lives is like having a David Goggins mentality and doing what he does. I'm not going to do it. It doesn't work for me because I have a family. I have a lot of stuff that's going on. I don't get paid to run 20 hours a day. But the challenge, the concept of being disciplined and being focused, and, controlling your mind does work for me. And I can use that.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely like a take what makes sense and its priorities. Right. And I think that that's sometimes the hardest thing for people to really understand is like, what are your priorities? And especially for me, like my priorities have, I think, improved since taking this job. But I think that your priorities have to be predetermined in a way that's going to allow you to respond the way you need to the events, right? And so I think that if you don't know what your priorities are, right? And we had a player come in and, she's like, at the beginning of the year, we asked her to move to libero, and she was like, I like to hit too much. So she never made the transition this fall, never did it. And she's a great human, love her, awesome kid, one of the funniest people on the team. And her priority was that she wanted to hit. So she played the whole year as a DS and played 3 rotations and was our best serve receiver by statistics. And we got to her exit meeting and she was like, so I should transition to libero, right? And I was like, so what changed? She's like, I want to be in the game. So like her priorities changed, which then changed her response. And like when we don't know exactly what our priorities are, or maybe we didn't like think all the way through, then our priorities are things that we think sound good or look good or are Instagram good. And then the actions and those lists that we have to make to actually understand like what are we going to get out of it, that we don't understand those, and then all of a sudden it takes us a little bit to like get it reorganized, and in the meantime we might become unhappy with the results and we don't know why, because like I'm doing what I said I thought I really wanted to do, and we just didn't think about it before we committed to the list.
Yeah, and there's so many people out there that start out doing something that they think that they want to do, and then over time they take chances and they do something different. So I've interviewed a gentleman, his name's Josh Wells, and he played quarterback in high school, really wanted to play quarterback in college. And he said he was an average athletic quarterback, but he had the physical, stats. So he was able to walk on to JMU, and they were like, well, we'll have you walk on, but as a tight end. You have the size and, some of the athletic ability. We'll have you at tight end. So he makes a spot as tight end. Then they move into defensive line. And then so he gains some weight there and he moves different positions. Well, they finally end up like, well, you would make a really athletic offensive tackle. Do you want to play tackle? He's like, I want to play. I want a spot. I want to stay here, and I'd love to earn a scholarship. Well, lo and behold, they move him to tackle. He plays 12 years in the NFL as an offensive tackle. But he started his career in high school never playing offensive tackle, played quarterback. And then you see several Hall of Fame players, not just in football, but across the board, that end up in a different position than what they had hoped and dreamed. And then that's where they flourish. And it sounds like with that player that you have, now you have a new sense of probably trust with her, because she's like, he saw something, he made this suggestion. I didn't want to do it. But then after everything, he was right.
Well, maybe, I hope that we're right, but more than that, it's like sometimes as the coach, you need to remember that the player needs to get there on their own. And so, like, one of the things that you can't do is you can't bully somebody into achieving what you want them to achieve. They will only achieve what they want to achieve. And I think understanding that if you can't, if you can't have a reasonable conversation to understand what they want to achieve, then you're guessing and they're guessing, and that's the fastest way to have a miscommunication. It just doesn't work. And so we had her play libero literally one day, and she just clearly her heart wasn't in it, and we never brought it up again. And but you as a coach, you have to be patient. As a parent, you have to be patient. As a player or a captain or a leader, you have to be patient. You can't want things for other people. And sometimes that's the hardest part about the job, because like, you're so dang close. Just like, trust me and you'll do it. And, sometimes you have players, and those are, oftentimes your favorite ones, but like, they're like, whatever you say, coach, that's great. And I sometimes believe them, and sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I need you to want what you want, because what you're going to want, you're going to achieve. And so it's great that you trust me, but at a certain point, I need you to want more than what I think, because that's what makes greatness, right? Like, that's what really sets people apart, is when they can hear something from the coach and be like, okay, that's a really good start, but also I still want more than that. So, I'll do that role for you right now, but also I'm going to be working on my own or extra or this or that to make this thing happen for me. And I think that's the thing that as coaches, we oftentimes know sometimes the right positional or tactical or skill thing for somebody, but until that's what they want, it doesn't mean or make any difference literally at all. And so you just have to be willing to sign up for the whole of the person, and not just the parts on the days that you are in accordance,
Well, and to me, that's why I think even having a personal vision, personal mission statement, those elements to where, Coach Huebner just talked about having a vision for the program, is, do you have your own personal vision? And then how does that play into what vision of whether it's your family or your workplace or your team that you're on? Do the two go hand in hand? And are you willing, as he had stated earlier, to be open-minded enough? Is like, my vision, let's say, is to be the best hitter in the nation. Okay, got it. Well, but the team needs greater than my needs, and so I think I could serve the team best there. Or is it, my vision is, I want to play college volleyball, and I'll do whatever I need to do to be on the team to play college volleyball. So there's a lot of differences that I think we should really think. And what Coach is really challenging you with as a listener right now is, do you have an idea of what you want? Are you setting the right expectations for yourself and others to have success? And have you set a timeline that you're willing to work within?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do they understand that timeline? Because especially in our sport, perfectionism kills great all the time. It just kills great. And like, kids can be so dang close, but they're so much more interested in perfect and comparison, and that they end up quitting or losing focus or losing motivation or losing encouragement before they end up being great. And when really what they were doing was like very much on the right just, they were taking the right steps. And so, um, how do we help kids see that stuff? I think that that's like the ultimate part of the job, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it's not easy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that he's laying it out very well and that it sounds like he's got it all figured out, but there's no way that anybody could ever do that. And again, if you use the message that you're listening to today and then modify it to best fit your situation, that you can come up with a really good solution and a pathway. And coach, I'm curious, when you look at last year versus this year,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say are some of the biggest or the biggest difference, if you're able to, between the two that really set you on the path of having more success in the wins column than you did last year?
I think we looked around a lot less, and I'm going to definitely need to explain that. My first year, we would do something good or do something bad, and we would look around right away, like immediately, whether that was like 1 point or 5 points, or we win a set. Like we won a set at Tampa last year on the road, and everybody was like, "Did you guys see that?" And we're just looking around, like, can we get some affirmation, or can we get something? Can somebody tell me that they just saw what happened, or something that was really bad to them in their brains? And then we look around and be like, "Oh, that was so bad. We're so embarrassed," and da da da. And this year, like, we were much less thoughtful about what are other people thinking about what am I currently doing, and those kids are the ones who ended up playing the most on the year, and the ones who were like very lost in like, what do other people, how are other people perceiving what I'm currently doing. You get distracted by life, or you get distracted from the real goals, and you don't end up being able to focus in a way. And especially in our league, which is the best Division II volleyball league in the country, you don't get to focus in a way that really allows you to make the progress that you want to make. And then you're worried that people will think that you didn't make the progress that you were supposed to make, and so now you're in this like cyclical shame circle, right? And this year we were like, okay, this is first weekend, this is what we need to do. And then we would do the things that we need to do. And then what does this mean? Okay, great. Second weekend, this is what we need to do. And we just sort of really, our team was really good at not checking to see what was going on with everybody else all the time. And we got about 3/4 of the way through the year, and we looked up and we're like, oh, we're third in conference, and we actually are going to be third in conference. Like we control our destiny here. Um, and I think that it would have been really tempting, especially after we got our first regional ranking or after our first national ranking this year. Like it would have been really tempting to look around. And we really did, I think, as a staff and our captains group, a really intentional job of, these things are just true. This is the new baseline. This is the new foundation. This is the new starting point. Um, this is not that exciting because it doesn't mean anything unless you finish it. And so let's finish it, and then we'll decide how exciting it was after it's over. And so now at the end of the year, we get to really like look back and try to figure out what doesn't go into the list of the things we accomplished this year, and how do we make that into, um, because the list is long and it's really cool and it's very encouraging. And everybody feels really good about it. But that, I think, was the biggest difference, is like and when we struggled, we were looking around. There was a match against Florida Tech, and we were there, and we beat the crud out of them in the first set. It was not close, and we're winning the second set, and then some fans started being rowdy and loud and noisy, and we were kind of looking around. And then we ended up losing in four, and everybody was like, "What just happened?" And so, similarly, like, we've lost twice to Nova this year, and which was probably the only team that our kids really felt like they wish that they could have had the games back, because they felt like we really underachieved in those. And most of it was like, just, we couldn't believe the things that were happening to us, around us, near us. And then we caught ourselves like eyes up and not like focused on the task at hand. And so then by the time that we started to really focus on the task at hand, it was out of hand. So it was somebody else's opportunity. So those were the things that I think they showed up a lot less for us. But I think that that was um, one of the biggest encouragements to us, and then also something that our team will take moving forward, because I think that they really are able to see how dangerous that mentality really ended up being for us in those little spaces, you know?
That's golden because we all look around too much, and social media forces us to do that if you put too much weight on it and you spend too much time in it. So, with your players, I'm curious, how did you help them when they got into that look around moment? Did you help them get out of that or redirect them to focusing on the job that it's at hand versus the outcome?
Yeah, so for us, we really try to lean on our routines. Like I never, um, it actually became a joke this year because we would come into the scouting report pregame, and and I would just say, "Well, what do we know?" And then I was so consistent in saying, "What do we know?" that the kids started having like Sunday morning group responses, and they would pick their favorite thing from the scouting report, and they would all say at the same time. And then after the game was over, I would always say, um, we'd always, I would just say highs and lows, because we always did highs and lows, no matter win, loss, upset of the year, it doesn't matter. Like, just highs and lows. And they started to like agree on the highs and lows before we get in the locker room, because it was so consistent. And I think that that really, on the days that you win, your routines matter very little. On the days that you lose, that's how you end up winning again. And so I think for us, like, they could count on little things, like we could lose and we're going to be out of the locker room in 15 minutes, just like we would be if we won. And we could lose, and I might have something long-winded to say, but we're not going to stick in there until we, you know, can't pay attention anymore, So there's a lot of stuff I think that we did well this year. And I think those routines are really what kind of get you back into it. And then also, self-fulfilling prophecy is a real thing. And there are certain things, if you want your team to be those things, you need to speak them into existence. And we were really good after a loss this year. Really good. Didn't matter if it was a set loss or a match loss. And we started talking about that early on in the year. We lost our first match against Fairmont State on the first day of season. We won the first match of the year, lost the second. We said, okay, we're going to be a team that's awesome after a loss. And then we were really good in the next two. And then that just became a thing that became true about us. And we didn't have a lot of experience losing, but we did decide how we were going to lose when we did. Even so much so that, like, we had an unfortunate situation with a player who started for us all year and was unable to go to the regional championships with us. And statistically was probably our second best player on the team. And our team played great in the regional. I wouldn't say that we didn't miss her, because we absolutely miss a second team all conference kid, but we were very well prepared for that moment. And we played a great volleyball match. And if you hadn't watched us during the year, you wouldn't have known that she was important or not important, because you would have thought that everybody who was there had always been doing that job, based on how they were trained and how they responded to adversity. And so, like, that part was something that I was really proud of. And I think that's like, those are all routine based. That's just, you got to give kids opportunities. You got to believe in them, and you have to tell them that they're going to be successful with a little bit of leeway for when they're not. And giving them the space to recover, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and it's grace, and because none of us are perfect in what we do. And so what I liked is you set intention, and you'd shared that we want to be excellent after a match, after really, and you could even say both winning and losing, because again, so often people overreact to wins and then overreact to losses.
Mm-hmm.
And just having that intention that you want to respond well after a loss is important, because losses are tough, especially in sports. And in life, it's the same thing. Is make a commitment that day. And that's why daily commitments are so important, and what you talked about before of setting gratitude, it grounds you and you realize where you're at and what you have. And it's a loss. Now move on. Because if you don't move on, that's going to turn into two, it's going to turn into three, and it's going to just run out of control.
Hmm. Yeah, and you talked about the expectations or the events and responses and outcomes. Like the only problem I've ever had with this formula is that I really don't think it's an addition problem. I think it's a multiplication problem.
Mm,
I think that I think the event is always worth one, and the response is usually worth two or three or four. And it might not come back to you immediately, but over the course of time, I think it's a multiplication problem, not a addition problem.
yep, for sure. Now, looking into next year, and I know that
Mhm.
you just finished.
Yeah, yeah.
And you already told me that, 5 seconds after the last game, people were asking you, what are you looking forward to next year? What's one thing that you're looking to add on to that you did this year to next year? 'Cause you're not someone that's like, okay, we did good enough and we're just going to keep doing the same thing. What are some things that you're going to add into next year?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we can do when the team gets here is set the expectation that it's a new year and that things that used to work won't always work, and things that used to not work won't always not work, because there are some things that you have to do in order to like actually get worse before you can get better. And there are some volleyball skill things that we're going to adjust. We have some graduating kids, and we run offense for the team of players that we have each year, not for the forever
Mm.
situation, right? And so there's a lot of things that need to change, and I think that making sure that we communicate with our team and our roster that like change is part of growth, and we need to be really thoughtful because the skill sets of the people who are going to be starting for us next year may or may not be the same. um, Even just like adjusting our offense from our last regular season game to our postseason game because of the player substitution that we had was like a minor overhaul. So I think our players are ready for that, but I also think that it's important for us to really unpack, you know, in a game that's 2 points here or there, like how do we get three more points per match, and what does that look like? And is it really that simple? And that answer is yes. Like, how do we improve skill sets by 2 or 3 points per player? And then that's going to have a profound impact on our team. Um, and also, I think the biggest thing for us is we have a leadership um, group that's really awesome. We have incredible followers, and we are graduating two of our three captains potentially. One of my captains may get another year. Um, but there's a lot of room to see some players who haven't been by title leaders step into those roles, and how are we going to mentor those people and teach them, and how are we going to take advantage of their leadership skill sets that may be different than the outgoing captains, and how do we modify our program to continue to to draw on their experiences, not just on like, hey, so this person's leaving, I need you to be just like her. I think that's pretty silly. I do think that that happens a lot. And we use words like replace in sports. And I think that, I don't know, I think that's rigid thinking when you use that word, because that's too, that means you're not appreciating what that person did as an individual for themselves. Right. And so, trying to make somebody into somebody else, I think is one of the common errors in coaching.
And it's just a word choice too. And so I'm glad
Right.
that you brought that up, because for a couple of reasons. One is you have to be adaptable year over year. And
Mhm.
this episode's coming out next week. So when this one comes out, it'll be, what's today? It'll be the 23rd. So it's right before Christmas. So we'll have one more week before the new year starts. And what's important about that is that you're looking into 2026. And this is for the listeners, is be adaptable. What are you going to do differently next year that you didn't do last year, but you want to add to it? It's not a complete overhaul. The other thing that you brought up was about replace. And when you start using the word replace, you're putting too much pressure on that one individual or that one new thing that you're adding into your life. It's like, well, what am I going to do to replace my income? What am I going to do to replace this? And that's a lot of pressure to put on that person to replace. And like you said, is that everybody's their own individual. If you think it's a replace, they may only want to live up to what that person did and not go further. And I want to
Mhm.
make this my own. versus how do we adapt? How do we move and flex and be successful with this new group of people?
Yeah. And I think that like you got to be careful with your words because your words oftentimes are ceilings and floors, right? And you need to make sure that your words more set the floor than set the ceiling, because you don't want to impose a growth limitation on somebody because you didn't understand the fullness of who God created them to be. Um, that feels very anti-Christian to me, and I think sometimes we don't consider people as like God's precious gifts to other people. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited about kind of those things. I also feel like part of how we look forward into the new year is replacing. It's like a trade system. Like you have certain things that are fixed and certain things that are not fixed. The amount of minutes you have is fixed, so you could trade this minute for that minute. Almost everything else that you have is not fixed. Occasionally money is fixed, but very, very occasionally, especially in today's world. So I think that that's like the only place that you can really think about, what can I trade? Can I trade these 4 minutes for these types of 4 minutes? Like otherwise it's never a one-to-one trade. And so it's futile to think about things in that way.
Well, and it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. It's the to-do list. It's the decision that you make of, do I want my 4 minutes to be in training for something because I know that I need to train more to get more out of my performance, whatever it may be, either on the volleyball court or at home, whatever. Or do I want to say, well, you know what? 4 minutes is better spent watching Netflix. I don't think you could ever say that. I think it's 4 minutes in doing anything other than that. But then that's that trade-off. Are you seeking comfort? Are you willing to challenge yourself to do more? And go back to what you had said earlier, the part of the to-do list that if you want to be all conference in life, there's things that you just have to sacrifice and be willing to put aside to try to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I also think that one of the things that we don't always remember as people is that we'd like to say that like there's consequences to everything, but the consequences to leadership are potentially devastating. And I think that I don't think that we're good enough at articulating to our young people how being a leader is uncool. Like, it sounds cool. I'm a captain. Like my daughter just, they get a little captain Velcro thing on their sock for soccer when they're the leader, and she's very excited to wear the bright yellow, letter C, and it sounds cool. And we do a lot to make it seem cool. But the thing where we fail so frequently, I think, as coaches and as parents and as just people who are trying to raise up the next generation, is that like not only is leadership not cool, but it is potentially dangerous. And I think if it's not potentially dangerous, then it's not leadership. And so then you really have to think about like, what is it that I'm actually doing? And if your leaders are not dangerous people, if there's no drama around your leaders, if there's no confusion sometimes of how hard they work, if there's no misunderstandings because she thought that I could do more and I'm having a bad day and I can't do more, then your leaders are probably, they're probably just encouragers, which you absolutely need encouragers, but that's a different job. And sometimes the price of leadership is not one that we're ready to pay because we didn't think about what that could actually mean,
Yeah, James talks about it in the Bible. Some people should just not be teachers. Yeah. Because there's a whole set of responsibilities that you will be held in higher, not necessarily regard, but in responsibility if you choose to be that person that is teaching other people. And like you said, is I feel like in society, we just say we want it, but not willing to accept that responsibility. And I think it was Charles Barkley or somebody who was like, I don't want to be a role model. Too late, dude. You play in the NBA. You're a role model, whether you want to be or not. Kids are going to look at you and want to emulate you because you're in a position that they want to be in. So you have to take that very seriously. And if you don't, quit the NBA and disappear. That's one of those things that it's a challenge that we have to. And I'm glad that you've challenged me and you've challenged the listeners to think about that, because it's important. And maybe that's the one thing that you change for next year, not you, meaning the listener, is you want to be seen as a leader within your community or in your home. So it all starts with the example that you set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too that like there's a measure of risk in everything, and you have to decide, what are you risking by not, and what are you risking by? And I think that especially for young people, they end up risking so much by not being willing to stretch themselves and stretch their friends and their teammates, or by not being willing to be uncool, or not being willing to say no, or they end up missing out on life's greatest blessings because of their intentional risk aversion, which we sometimes like impose upon them as parents and as coaches. And I think that like, how do we support these like dynamic and scary choices that our young people are wanting to make? And like, we have so much to do with that. And if you're a coach or you're a parent who, when your player or kid does something that was risky and they're trying to do the right thing and they just flatly messed it up, like, then you're going to end up creating somebody who learns that the risk is in the risk and not in the reward. And like, you need to be able to be willing to take these chances. And I think that especially now, we are so risk averse as a society that we see ourselves like sometimes going backwards on certain things that have been true for years and years and years and years. And all of a sudden we're moving backwards on certain things that, and it's not a function of capability. People are more capable now than they've ever been. It's a function of like, are they willing to put in the work that goes with being willing to take the risk and fail? And again, that's a ceiling word that we want to try to avoid as coaches and as people.
Yeah. And while you were talking, I was thinking also is that the more you go through that risk taking process, it's a skill. The first risk is really scary. Then the second risk, it's not as scary. Then it turns, and I talked about this a couple of episodes ago, then it turns into you just changing that feeling that risk feels like fear and you're scared to risk now feels exciting. Mm-hmm. What am I going to get? What am I going to learn? And so it's a choice. It's what Coach had said before. Well, Coach Huebner, we were up on an hour, and I know that you have an extremely busy schedule, as we had discussed before. So what would be something you'd like to leave the audience with today?
I think if I took anything from this year, it's the power of faith, and how when you're surrounded by people who believe, whether it's in your faith, your Christianity faith, or your whatever your religion is, or if it's just in your sport or in your coaching staff or in your teammates, if you can put yourself in a situation the way that we were in this year, that was so gratifying, where when it's hard, people want to try to get better. And when people are better, they want to try to get better. And you can be in a place where like, you can feel the faith of other people and they're willing to communicate that to you, then your ceiling is higher. And I was a better coach this year because of how good my players are at believing in me. And our staff really allowed us to continue to improve. And I appreciate that. And I think that like demonstrating your faith in people and demonstrating your faith in others and being willing to like get vulnerable and say those things out loud, I hope that we all can go into the new year and be like, hey, I'm upset because I think you could do more, not because you didn't do enough. I think that would be a really cool place for us to start in 26.
It's a great challenge. I believe that all the listeners can do more. We all can, and I'm excited about what 26 will be. So much so I can't even talk.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep. But Coach, thank you for spending time with me. Hang on one second once I sign us off. But as normal, I really enjoyed our conversation. This will be another one that I reference on all of my future episodes. I think I reference at least one Jeff Huebner quote amongst everything. And it was, I shared it with him and I shared it on my story that his episode was the most listened to episode in 25. And so I know that this one's going to challenge that one. We won't have as much time for people to take advantage of. So it's going to run into 26 and maybe it'll be the best in 25 and 26. So I know everybody will benefit from it. So hang on one second. But ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Huebner.
Thanks so much.